Everyone rose when the alien Empress arrived, except one human, and the reason shocked everyone. The Grand Assembly Hall of the Galactic Covenant stretched for nearly a kilometer in every direction, and its ceiling rose so high that clouds sometimes formed beneath the glass dome. Representatives from 47 different species filled the curved rows of seats, their bodies ranging from insectoid to crystalline, to forms that human eyes could barely comprehend. The air carried 100 different scents and the soft hum of translation devices, working overtime to convert countless languages into something each delegate could understand. Dr. Park Soo-min sat in the human delegation section, her weathered hands resting on the curved handle of her walking cane. At 63 years old, she had seen more of the galaxy than most humans ever would, and the scars on her body told stories that she rarely shared with anyone. Her gray hair was pulled back in a simple knot, and her dark eyes watched the massive doors at the far end of the hall with calm patience. "You seem relaxed," whispered Commander Yoon Ji-ho, the young military attaché seated beside her. His uniform was crisp and perfect, and nervous sweat beaded on his forehead. "How can you be so calm when the Valarith Empress is about to walk through those doors?" Soo-min smiled softly and adjusted her position in the hovering seat. "I have learned that worry does not change outcomes," she replied in her quiet voice. "Whatever happens today will happen whether I am afraid or not." Ji-ho shook his head in disbelief. The Valarith were the most feared species in the known galaxy, and their Empress had ruled for over 300 years through conquest and absolute dominance. Her empire spanned 2,000 worlds, and her armies had crushed every species foolish enough to challenge her authority. Today she would announce her decision regarding the frontier worlds, a cluster of resource-rich planets that sat between Valara space and the territories of younger species like humanity. War or peace hung in the balance, and everyone in the hall knew it. A deep horn sounded, its vibration traveling through the floor and into every body present. The massive doors began to slide open, revealing darkness beyond. Every translation device in the hall spoke the same words in perfect unison. "All rise for her eternal majesty. Sithara the Undying, Empress of the Valarith Dominion. Conqueror of the 17 realms, mother of 10,000 warriors." The sound of thousands of beings rising to their feet filled the chamber like rolling thunder. Chairs scraped and bodies shifted as every delegate stood in the ancient gesture of submission that the Valarith demanded from all lesser species. The Morith delegation rose on their tentacles. The crystalline Vethkai stood with musical chiming sounds. Even the proud Korathi warriors, who bowed to no one, climbed to their feet with expressions of barely hidden resentment. Every being in the Grand Assembly Hall rose. Every being except one. Dr. Park Soo-min remained seated, her hands folded calmly over her cane, her expression peaceful and undisturbed. Ji-ho's face went pale with horror. "Dr. Park, what are you doing?" he hissed frantically. "You must stand. This is a direct insult to the Empress. She could declare war on humanity for this." "I am fine where I am," Soo-min replied quietly. The Empress emerged from the darkness, and gasps echoed through the chamber at the sight of her. Sithara stood over 3 meters tall, her insectoid body covered in natural armor that gleamed like polished obsidian. 4 arms emerged from her thorax, each ending in claws that could slice through steel. Her compound eyes contained thousands of facets that reflected the light like dark jewels, and her mandibles clicked together in a pattern that her subjects recognized as displeasure. Behind her marched 12 elite guards, each one a perfect killing machine, bred for war and utterly loyal to their Empress. Their weapons hummed with barely contained energy, and their movements were perfectly synchronized. The Empress walked down the central aisle with slow, deliberate steps, her gaze sweeping across the submissive delegates. Then her compound eyes locked onto something unexpected, a single figure still seated among the standing masses. A human. The clicking of her mandibles grew louder, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop. Her guards immediately moved forward, their weapons rising toward the human delegation. Screams erupted from nearby species, who scrambled to distance themselves from the offending human. "She has doomed us all," someone wailed in the back rows. The Empress raised one clawed hand, and her guards froze mid-step. The silence that followed was so complete the delegates could hear their own hearts beating. Sithara changed direction, abandoning her path to the central podium and walking instead toward the human section. Each step brought her closer to Dr. Park Soo-min, who remained seated with that same peaceful expression on her weathered face. Jiho was trembling so badly that he could barely stand. Other human delegates were backing away, their faces masks of terror. But Soo-min did not move, did not flinch, did not show even the slightest sign of fear. The Empress stopped directly in front of the seated human, towering over her like a mountain of chitin and death. Her shadow fell across Soo-min's small form, blocking out the light. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then the Empress spoke, her voice resonating through every translation device in the hall. "Human, do you know who I am?" "Yes, Your Majesty," Soo-min answered calmly. "You are Empress Sithara of the Valorith Dominion. Then, you know that every being must rise in my presence." The Empress's eyes glittered dangerously. "Yet you remain seated. Is this defiance? Is this an insult from your species? Do humans wish to test the patience of my empire?" Soo-min looked up at the massive alien before her, and something strange happened. She smiled. It was a gentle smile, warm and without fear. "Forgive me, Your Majesty," she said in her soft voice. "I mean no disrespect to you or your great empire. I would stand if I could." She gestured down at her legs with one weathered hand. "But I am afraid these old legs no longer work the way they should. I cannot rise because I cannot walk without assistance. The nerves were damaged many years ago, and they never healed properly." The Empress's mandibles stopped clicking. Her compound eyes focused on the human's legs, then on the king, then back to the human's face. When she spoke again, her voice carried something that no one in the hall expected. Curiosity. "How did this happen to you, human?" The question hung in the air like smoke from a dying fire. Every delegate in the Grand Assembly Hall leaned forward, desperate to hear the answer. The Empress herself seemed frozen in place, her compound eyes fixed on the small human woman who sat before her without fear. Dr. Park Soo-min took a slow breath and let the memories wash over her. They were old memories now, faded around the edges but still sharp where it mattered most. "It happened 32 years ago," she began, her voice steady and clear. "I was a young medic serving on a station called Waypoint 7, near the border of what was then contested space. I was only 31 years old, full of energy and the belief that I could save everyone who needed saving." The Empress remained perfectly still, but her mandibles had stopped their threatening clicks. Around the hall, translation devices carried Soo-min's words to every ear. "One night, the alarms started screaming," Soo-min continued. "A ship had come out of hyperspace badly damaged, its hull torn open and its engines failing. It was going to crash into the station if we did not act quickly. Our commander ordered everyone to evacuation points, but I heard something on the emergency channel that made me stop." She paused, her weathered hands tightening slightly on her cane. It was a distress call in a language I did not understand, but the translation computer told me what they were saying. They were begging for help. They were saying that there were children on board larvae who could not survive in the vacuum of space. They were Valarith. A ripple of shock passed through the assembly. The Morith delegates exchanged confused glances. The Karthi warriors muttered among themselves. Even the Empress's own guards shifted uncomfortably. "A Valarith colony ship?" the Empress asked, her voice suddenly quieter. "Yes, Your Majesty, Sumin confirmed. It was a transport carrying civilians and young ones to a new settlement world. Raiders had attacked them in deep space, and they had barely escaped with their lives. But their ship was dying, and they were going to die with it unless someone helped them. Jiho stared at Dr. Park with wide eyes. He had served with her for 3 years, and she had never mentioned any of this. Our commander ordered us to let them crash, Sumin said. He said the Velareth were enemies of humanity, that helping them would be treason. But I looked at the sensor readings and saw the life signs, so many small life signs, clustered together in the nursery section of the ship. I could not just watch them die. The Empress leaned closer, her massive form casting Sumin entirely in shadow. What did you do, human? Sumin's smile returned, tinged with old sorrow. I disobeyed orders. I took a shuttle and flew to the damaged ship while it was still tumbling through space. The hull breaches were everywhere, and the atmosphere was venting into the void. I had to wear a pressure suit just to move through the corridors. The memories played behind her eyes like an old recording. She remembered the darkness, the floating debris, the sound of her own breathing inside the helmet. She remembered the cold that seeped through her suit and the fear that squeezed her heart. I found the nursery section, she continued. The adult Velareth were already dead. They had sealed the room and given all the remaining oxygen to their young ones. 47 larvae were huddled together in the center of the room, wrapped in thermal blankets and crying for their parents. They were so small, Your Majesty. Some of them could fit in the palm of my hand. The Empress made a sound that the translation device could not interpret. I started carrying them to my shuttle, 2 or 3 at a time. The ship was breaking apart around me, and I knew I did not have much time. On my 7th trip, a support beam collapsed and crushed my legs against the deck. I could not feel anything below my waist, but I could see the last group of larvae still waiting in the nursery. Sumin's voice remained steady, but her eyes glistened with moisture. I dragged myself across the floor using only my arms. It took me almost an hour to reach them and another hour to pull myself and the remaining larvae back to the shuttle. By the time I got the airlock sealed, the colony ship was already falling into the station's atmosphere. I flew my shuttle clear just before the impact. Silence filled the grand assembly hall. No one moved. No one breathed. 47 larvae survived. Sumin finished. I spent 6 months in a medical facility afterward, but the nerve damage was too severe. The doctor said I would never walk normally again. But when I think about those children, those young lives that gotta grow up, because someone cared enough to help them, I do not regret my choice. Not for a single moment. The Empress stood motionless for so long that some delegates began to wonder if she had malfunctioned somehow. Then she did something that no one in the hall could have predicted. She spoke a name. Colony Transport Vessel Vesthar, the Empress said, her voice barely above a whisper. Bound for the settlement world of Kiris Prime. Attacked by raiders in the hollow expanse. Only the larvae survived, rescued by an unknown benefactor who vanished before anyone could thank them. Sumin's eyes widened slightly. You know of that ship? Know of it? The Empress's compound eyes blazed with sudden intensity. Human, my youngest daughter was on that ship. She was among the larvae you saved. For 32 years, we searched for the one who rescued her. For 32 years, we never discovered who it was. The hall erupted in chaos. Delegates shouted and gasped and clutched at each other in disbelief. The Empress of the Velareth, the most powerful being in the galaxy, had just revealed that this simple human woman had saved her own child. And then the Empress did something that made the chaos fall into stunned silence. She knelt. The great and terrible Sithara the Undying, conqueror of the 17 realms, lowered her massive body and pressed her forehead to the floor before Dr. Park Sumin. In 10,000 years, the Empress whispered in a voice that trembled with emotion. "No Valorith ruler has ever knelt before another being. But you deserve more than I can ever give you, human. You are Vex Shara, a sheltering wing, the highest honor my people can bestow. You protected our young when you had every reason to let them die." Her guards dropped to their knees as well, their weapons clattering to the ground. "What is your name?" the Empress asked. "Tell me the name of the one who saved my daughter." "Park Soo-min," she answered softly. "My name is Park Soo-min." The news spread through the Galactic Covenant like fire through dry grass. Within hours, every species in known space had heard the story of the human woman who had saved the Empress's daughter 32 years ago. News feeds broadcast the footage of Empress Sathara kneeling before Dr. Park Soo-min, and analysts across 1,000 worlds struggled to explain what it meant. For some species, it was a moment of hope. Perhaps the fearsome Valorith could be reasoned with after all. Perhaps humanity's example of compassion could change the future of galactic politics. But for others, it was a disaster. Ambassador Kethvorin of the Morith Syndicate watched the news feeds from his private quarters aboard the station, and his tentacles writhed with barely contained fury. The Morith were a cunning species known for their skill in manipulation and trade, and Kethvorin was the most cunning of them all. For years, he had been working to push the Valarith and humanity toward war, knowing that the conflict would weaken both species and allow the Syndicate to expand into their territories. Now a single crippled human woman had ruined everything. "This cannot stand," he hissed to his assistant. "Find something we can use against her. Search every database, every record, every scrap of information. There must be something." His assistant hurried away, and Kethvorin returned to his scheming. He would not let decades of careful planning collapse because of one inconvenient hero. Back in the Grand Assembly Hall, the atmosphere had transformed completely. Where there had been fear and tension before, there was now celebration and wonder. Delegates from dozens of species approached the human section to offer their congratulations, and the Empress herself had taken a seat beside Dr. Park Soo-min as if they were old friends. "I must ask you something," the Empress said, her voice carrying only to Soo-min's ears through a private translation channel. "Why did you never come forward? You could have demanded rewards beyond imagination. The Valarith would have given you anything." Soo-min shook her head gently. "I did not save those children for reward, Your Majesty. I saved them because they needed saving. That is all the reason I ever needed." The Empress's mandibles clicked in what Soo-min now recognized as a sign of deep approval. "Humans are strange creatures," Sathara admitted. "So soft, so fragile, with such short lives. Yet you produce individuals capable of such remarkable selflessness. I confess I do not understand your species. Perhaps that is why you should not go to war with us," Soo-min suggested with a small smile. Before the Empress could respond, a commotion erupted near the main doors. Delegates scattered as a new figure strode into the hall, surrounded by Valarith warriors in ceremonial armor. This newcomer was clearly Valarith, but younger and smaller than the Empress, with patterns on her carapace that marked her as royalty. "My daughter," the Empress said, rising to her full height. "Vixthari has come." Commander Vixthari crossed the hall with quick, purposeful steps. Her compound eyes were fixed on Dr. Park Soo-min with an intensity that made nearby delegates nervous. When she reached the human section, she stopped and stood trembling before the elderly woman. "Is it true?" Vixthari asked, her voice thick with emotion. "Are you the one? Are you the soft alien with gentle hands who carried me through the darkness?" Soo-min looked up at the young Valarith commander and felt tears prick at her eyes. "You were so small," she whispered. "You fit perfectly in the crook of my arm. You stopped crying when I held you close and hummed an old song my grandmother taught me." Vicstari made a sound that the translation device rendered as a sob. I remember the humming. I remember feeling safe, even though everything was falling apart around us. For 32 years, I have dreamed of that sound and wondered who made it. She dropped to her knees beside her mother, pressing her forehead to the floor before Su-min. You gave me my life, Vicstari said. Everything I have ever accomplished, every battle I have won, every moment of joy I have experienced, all of it exists because you chose to help when you did not have to. How can I ever repay such a debt? The hall filled with the sounds of weeping from species who had never expected to feel such emotions at a diplomatic summit. Even the stunned Karivi warriors wiped moisture from their eyes. But the moment of beauty was about to be shattered. Ambassador Kethvoran slithered into the hall, his tentacles raised in the gesture that demanded attention. Honored delegates, he called out in a voice like oil sliding over stone. I must speak. There is something you all need to know. The Empress turned toward him, her eyes narrowing with suspicion. What do you want, Morith? Can you not see we are having a moment of significance? That is precisely why I must speak, Kethvor replied smoothly. I have discovered information that cast doubt on this touching reunion. Information that suggests Dr. Park Soo-min is not the hero she claims to be. Angry muttering rippled through the hall. Jiho stepped forward with his fists clenched, but Soo-min placed a calming hand on his arm. What information? The Empress demanded. Kethvorn's tentacles curled in satisfaction. Records show that Dr. Park was disciplined for her actions that day. Her own commanders accused her of recklessness and endangering her station. Perhaps her rescue was not heroism at all. Perhaps it was merely a calculated attempt to gain favor with the Velarth for political purposes. That is absurd, Su-min said calmly. I did not even know the Empress's daughter was aboard that ship. So you claim, Kethvorn sneered. But how can we trust the word of a human who disobeyed her own military? The tension in the hall was rising again, and Kethvorn felt a surge of triumph. If he could just plant enough doubt, he could still salvage his plans. But Vicstari rose to her feet, her eyes blazing with fury. I was there, she declared. I remember the human who saved us. She was bleeding and broken, dragging herself across the floor with her arms, because her legs no longer worked. Does that sound like calculated politics to you? Does that sound like someone seeking favor? Kethvorn's confidence wavered, but he pressed on. The young commander's memories are unreliable. She was only a larva at the time. My memories are perfect, Vicstari snarled. And I remember something else as well. I remember the markings on the raiders' ships. I remember them because my caretakers made me memorize them so I could identify our attackers if I ever saw them again. She turned to face the hall, her voice rising. Those markings belong to mercenary vessels registered to the Morris Syndicate. A gasp of horror swept through the delegates. Kethvorn's tentacles went rigid with shock. That is a lie. The Syndicate had nothing to do with that attack. Then explain why Syndicate ships attacked a civilian transport carrying Velarth larvae, Vicstari demanded. Explain why the attack happened in a sector where only the Syndicate had operational presence. Explain why the raiders knew exactly where the nursery section was located. The Empress turned slowly toward Kethvoran, and her eyes burned with a rage that made the air itself seem to tremble. Yes, Ambassador, she said in a voice as cold as the void between stars. Explain. Ambassador Kethvoran looked around the Grand Assembly Hall for allies, but found only faces full of disgust and accusation. His tentacles twisted and writhed as his brilliant mind searched desperately for an escape. This is all circumstantial, he protested. Markings can be faked. Coordinates can be falsified. You have no proof that the Syndicate ordered that attack. Then you will not mind if we examine your communication archives from that period. the Empress said, her voice deadly calm. I am certain the Galactic Covenant would be happy to authorize a full investigation. Kefvorn's color shifted from his natural blue to a sickly gray. That would be a violation of Syndicate sovereignty. We will not submit to such an intrusion. So you refuse to clear your name? Vixthari pressed. That seems like the behavior of someone with much to hide. The other delegates began to murmur angrily. Even species that had been friendly with the Morith Syndicate were pulling away, their representatives moving to the far sides of the hall. Nobody wanted to be associated with a species that would attack helpless larvae. Very well, Kefvorn hissed, his composure finally cracking. Yes, the Syndicate arranged the attack. We hope to blame it on humanity and trigger a war between your species. With the Velareth and humans destroying each other, the Syndicate would have been free to expand into both territories. The confession hung in the air like poison gas. You tried to murder my daughter, the Empress said slowly, each word dripping with venom. You tried to murder 47 innocent larvae for political gain. You would have started a war that killed billions all for territory and profit. Her guards moved forward without needing orders, seizing Kefvorn's tentacles and forcing him to the ground. The ambassador screamed and thrashed, but the Velareth warriors held him with ease. Under Velareth law, the punishment for threatening larvae is death by dismemberment, the Empress announced. The sentence will be carried out immediately. She raised one clawed hand, ready to give the order. Wait! The voice was not loud, but it cut through the chaos like a knife. Everyone turned to see Dr. Park Soo-min struggling to rise from her seat, using her cane to push herself upright on her damaged legs. Your Majesty, she said, breathing heavily from the effort. I ask you to show mercy. The Empress stared at her in disbelief. Mercy? For this creature who would have killed my daughter? For this schemer who would have drowned the galaxy in blood? Yes, Soo-min answered firmly. Mercy even for him. Why? The Empress's voice cracked with genuine confusion. He deserves death 1,000 times over. Why would you, of all beings, ask me to spare him? He tried to destroy everything you saved. Soo-min hobbled forward until she stood between the Empress and the cowering ambassador. Because killing him will not undo what he did. Because revenge will not heal old wounds or prevent future ones. Because the galaxy is watching, Your Majesty, and they are waiting to see what kind of ruler you truly are. The Empress's mandibles clicked rapidly. You asked me to appear weak before my enemies. No, Soo-min said gently. I ask you to appear strong. Any tyrant can order an execution. Any conqueror can spill blood. But it takes true strength to hold that power and choose not to use it. It takes courage to offer mercy when vengeance would be so much easier. The hall had gone completely silent. Every delegate watched the confrontation between the tiny human and the massive alien ruler with breathless attention. You humans, the Empress said, shaking her great head. You confuse me endlessly. You are so soft, so fragile. You break easily and heal slowly. You live such brief lives that by Velareth standards, you are barely more than children. Yet you speak of strength as if you understand it. She leaned down until her face was level with Soo-min's. Tell me, human, how you survive being so soft? How has your species not been crushed by harder, stronger races? Soo-min met the Empress's compound eyes without flinching. We survive because we protect each other. We are soft with our friends, gentle with our children, kind to strangers who need our help. But we are fierce when that softness is threatened. She gestured to her own damaged legs. I broke myself saving your daughter because I could not bear to let innocent children die. That is human softness. But I would do it again without hesitation, and I would face any enemy who tried to stop me. That is human strength. The Empress was silent for a long moment. We are not soft because we are weak, Sumin continued. We are soft because we can afford to be. We protect each other fiercely enough that we can show gentleness to those who need it, even to our enemies. That is not weakness, Your Majesty. That is strength with control. That is power with purpose. Vixthari stepped forward to stand beside Sumin. Mother, she said quietly, this human broke her body to save me when she had every reason to let me die. If she asks for mercy, should we not at least listen? The Empress looked at her daughter, then at the human woman who had given that daughter back to her 32 years ago. Her claws slowly lowered. What would you have me do with him? She asked to zoom in. If not death, then what? Let others decide, Sumin suggested. The Galactic Covenant has laws for crimes like this. Let the victim species have a voice in his punishment. Show the galaxy that the Velorith can follow the rules they helped create. The Empress considered this for a long moment. Her guard still held Kethvoran, who had stopped struggling and was watching the exchange with desperate hope in his eyes. You asked me to give up my right to vengeance, the Empress said slowly. I ask you to give the galaxy hope, Sumin replied. I ask you to show them that even the mightiest empire can choose justice over blood. That would be a greater victory than any conquest. The Empress rose to her full height and looked out across the Grand Assembly Hall. Thousands of eyes stared back at her, waiting to see what she would do. I have ruled for 300 years, she announced, her voice carrying to every corner of the vast chamber. I have conquered worlds and crushed rebellions and made the name Valerith synonymous with fear. But today, a human has taught me something I did not know. She turned to face the human delegation. She has taught me that there are victories greater than conquest and strength greater than force. And so I will do something that no Valarith ruler has ever done. Her compound eyes fixed on Sumin with something that might have been respect. I will let the humans decide the fate of this criminal. Whatever punishment they choose, the Valarith Empire will accept. This is my gift to the species that saved my daughter, the gift of trust. The hall erupted in astonished voices, but Sumin just smiled. Thank you, Your Majesty, she said softly. You will not regret this. The human delegation spent 3 days in heated debate. Representatives from every nation on Earth connected via secure channels to discuss what should be done with Ambassador Kethvoran. Some argued for execution, saying that the crime was too severe for any lesser punishment. Others called for life imprisonment in the harshest facility humanity possessed. A few even suggested handing him back to the Valarith and letting them do whatever they wanted. But in the end, a different voice prevailed. Dar Park Sumin addressed the council from her seat in the Grand Assembly Hall, her face projected on screens across the human homeworld. We have been given an extraordinary opportunity, she said. The entire galaxy is watching to see what humanity will do with this power. We can show them that we are just another species driven by vengeance and blood, or we can show them something different. Her words carried weight that few could match. This was the woman who had sacrificed her legs for alien children, who had stood before the most powerful ruler in the galaxy and asked for mercy. I do not ask you to forgive Kethvoran, she continued. What he did was monstrous, and forgiveness is not ours to give. It belongs to the families of those who died on that colony ship. But we can choose justice over revenge. We can choose to be the species that shows the galaxy a better way. The final vote was close, but humanity made its decision. Ambassador Kethvoran would be stripped of his rank and titles. His personal fortune would be seized and distributed to the families of those who had died in the attack. He would spend the rest of his life in exile on a barren moon, forbidden from ever holding political power again. And the Morris Syndicate would pay reparations to the Valarith Empire for the next 100 years. It was not death, but it was not mercy either. It was justice measured, thoughtful, and fair. When the decision was announced in the Grand Assembly Hall, the reaction was immediate. Species that had long feared humanity as unpredictable apes suddenly looked at them with new respect. The Valerith guards who had been ready to dismember Kethvora nodded in approval. The punishment was fitting, even if it was not what they would have chosen. And the Empress herself rose and inclined her great head toward the human delegation. "You have surprised me again," she admitted. "I expected blood. Instead, you have given us something far more valuable proof that strength and wisdom can exist together." She turned to address the full assembly. "For years, I came to this summit prepared to announce war. The frontier worlds would have been the first battlefield, and millions would have died. But recent events have changed my perspective." Her compound eyes swept across the thousands of delegates. "The Valarith Empire will not claim the frontier worlds. Instead, we propose something new, a joint protectorate shared between the Valarith and humanity. Together, we will develop these worlds peacefully, sharing resources and knowledge. Let this be the beginning of a new era." The hall exploded with cheers and applause. Delegates who had arrived expecting catastrophe now celebrated an outcome none of them could have predicted. History was being made before their eyes. Later that evening, Dr. Park Soo-min sat alone on a balcony overlooking the station's observation deck. The stars stretched out before her in endless patterns, and she felt a deep peace settle into her bones. For the first time in 32 years, she felt that her sacrifice had truly meant something. "May I join you?" She turned to find Commander Vixthari standing in the doorway, her posture uncertain in a way that seemed strange for a Valarith warrior. "Of course," Soo-min said, gesturing to the seat beside her. Vixthari settled her large frame onto the specially reinforced chair and was quiet for a long moment. "I have something I wish to offer you," she finally said, "but I am afraid you will refuse." "What is it?" Vixthari reached into a pouch at her side and withdrew a small device. "Valarith medical technology is far advanced beyond what humans possess. We have treatments that can regenerate damaged nerve tissue, even tissue that was injured decades ago." Soo-min's breath caught in her throat. "This device contains everything needed for the procedure," Vixthari continued. "Our physicians have studied human biology, and they are confident it will work. I am offering you the chance to walk again, Dr. Park. To run, to dance, to move freely for the first time in 32 years. Soo-min looked at the device, and tears began to roll down her weathered cheeks. For so long, she had accepted her limitations as the price of her choice. She had never regretted saving those children. But there had been nights when she dreamed of walking on the beach or climbing mountains or simply standing without pain. "I am not sure I deserve this," she whispered. Vixthari reached out and took her hand with surprising gentleness. "You deserve far more than this. You gave me my life. Let me give you back your legs." In Valarith culture, it is the highest honor to restore what was lost in the protection of our young. Please accept this gift." Soo-min looked into Vixthari's compound eyes and saw something that transcended species gratitude, love, and the desperate hope of someone trying to repay an unpayable debt. "Very well," she said softly. "I accept." 1 month later, the Grand Assembly Hall was filled once again for the signing of the Frontier Worlds Treaty. This time, there was no fear in the air, only hope and celebration. Human and Valarith delegates sat side by side, discussing trade agreements and cultural exchanges as if they had been allies for centuries. The great doors opened, and the herald announced the arrival of Empress Sithara. Every being in the hall rose to their feet in respect, not submission, but genuine honor for a ruler who had chosen peace over war. And this time, Dr. Park Soo-min rose with them. She stood tall and straight, her cane nowhere to be seen. Her legs, whole and strong and healed, supported her weight without trembling. When she took a step forward, It was smooth and confident, the walk of someone who had been reborn. The Empress entered the hall and immediately found Su Min among the crowd. Her compound eyes widened at the sight of the human standing on her own 2 feet. Sithara walked down the central aisle until she stood before Dr. Park. The two of them, the mighty Empress and the humble human doctor, faced each other as equals. "You are standing," the Empress observed. "Thanks to your daughter's gift," Su Min replied with a warm smile. The Empress's mandibles clicked in approval. Then she did something that made the entire hall gasp. She bowed. Not a small nod, but a full, deep bow that bent her massive frame nearly in half. The conqueror of the 17 realms, the most feared ruler in the galaxy, bowing to a human woman who had never conquered anything except her own fear. "This is how it should be," the Empress declared, straightening once more. "Those who protect the innocent deserve the highest honors. Those who show mercy deserve respect. And those who teach even empresses to be better deserve to stand tall." Su Min bowed in return, equal to equal. Around them, the galaxy watched in wonder. Historians would later call this moment the beginning of the Great Peace, when the two most unlikely species in the cosmos became the closest of allies. Trade flourished, knowledge was shared, and slowly the old fears began to fade. And it had all started because one human woman refused to let children die, not for glory, not for reward, but simply because it was the right thing to do. Sometimes the universe changes not through great battles or brilliant strategies, but through small acts of compassion that ripple outward until they touch the stars. Dr. Park Su Min walked out of the Grand Assembly Hall on her own 2 feet, Vixthari at her side, and looked up at the infinite night sky with joy in her heart. The future was bright, and she had helped make it so.